Hello, and welcome to today's webinar. It's a generational thing, creating an understanding of MS between parents and their children, Part 1. Thank you for joining us. My name is Nikki, and I will be the operator for the presentation today. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to share with you a few of the features of the webinar platform. For this webinar, attendees will be in a listen-only mode. At any time, you may adjust your audio using any computer volume settings that you may have. If you need technical assistance, please submit your request under the Tech Support tab in the window on the right-hand side of your computer screen. If you wish to submit a question during the presentation, please use the Q&A window on the right-hand side of your computer screen. Once you type your question, please be sure to press Enter to submit your question. We will try to answer these during the Q&A portion of the webinar, but if an in-depth answer is needed or we run out of time, we will try to answer it at a later time via email. We do capture all questions. We are joined today by our moderator, Alexis Crispino from the Multiple Sclerosis Association of America, and our speakers, Dr. Lana Harder and Katherine Chapman. At this time, I would like to turn the microphone over to our moderator, Alexis, for opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Nikki. Hello and welcome to the Multiple Sclerosis Association of America's live webinar, It's a Generational Thing, Part 1. I'm Alexis Crispino, Director of Education and Healthcare Relations for the Multiple Sclerosis Association of America's South Central Region and your host for this afternoon's program. On behalf of MSAA, our partners at Impact Education, our speakers and sponsors, we greatly appreciate the opportunity to connect with all of you. And please know we hope you and your family are staying safe and healthy. As many of you may know, MSAA is a national nonprofit organization dedicated to improving lives today for individuals living with MS and their care community nationwide. Some of our free services include a national helpline, equipment and cooling products, MRI funding, an online community, and robust publication library. You can visit our website at mymsaa.org to try out our new COVID-19 and MS Pathfinder tool, which provides ongoing updates and resources on the coronavirus. Check out the most recent MSI and educational program videos, and much, much more. Also, please know that MSAA has expanded our usual helpline hours until 8 p.m. Eastern between Mondays and Thursdays. Now, the reason we're here together today, It's a Generational Thing Part 1 and Part 2 will be featuring expert speakers Dr. Lana Harder and Katherine Chapman, licensed clinical social worker. At the conclusion of the presentation, we will have time for a question and answer session, so please be sure to submit any questions that come to mind throughout the program in the chat box. Also, as a friendly note, the MSAA Educational Program Survey will be available as a link at the end of the program. Completion of these surveys are integral to ensuring the efficacy and quality of our educational programs, and so we thank you for taking the time to complete this for us. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Bristol-Myers Squibb, Genentech, and Novartis for making this webinar possible. So without further ado, I'm honored and delighted to introduce our esteemed speakers for this afternoon, Dr. Lana Harder and Katherine Chapman, licensed clinical social worker. Dr. Harder leads the Neuropsychology Service and Neuropsychology Training Program at Children's Hospital in Dallas, Texas. She holds dual faculty appointments as Associate Professor of Psychiatry, Neurology, and Neurotherapeutics at UT Southwestern. She's board certified in clinical neuropsychology and is a board certified subspecialist in pediatric neuropsychology. Dr. Harder was a founding member and is the current co-director of the Children's Pediatric Demyelinating Disease Clinic, and her research interests include physiosocial outcomes for pediatric multiple sclerosis, transverse myelitis, acute disseminated encephalomyelitis, and neuromyelitis optica. Katherine Chapman, licensed clinical social worker, received her bachelor's degree in sociology and master's of social work at Louisiana State University. She received her board certification in 1998 and is a licensed clinical social worker. Katherine works with dynamic multidisciplinary teams participating in research and patient care at Children's Health Dallas, as well as with the Multiple Sclerosis Program at UT Southwestern, where Katherine has been since 2002. She assists children and their families by locating resources, providing support and information. She serves as a therapist in the adult clinic, assisting people with MS to manage depression, anxiety, insomnia, and general life stressors. We are so pleased to have you join us for this timely conversation, and I am honored to introduce Dr. Lana Harder to get our conversation started. Dr. Harder?
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me today. It's a pleasure to be with everyone. I have been working in the area of MS for over a decade, actually in the clinic in Dallas alongside Katherine, my co-presenter today. I've learned so much from the patients and families I have the privilege to serve. And I just want to acknowledge that this topic today is complicated. Multiple sclerosis and navigating common emotions. I believe human emotions are complex enough, but when we add additional elements, like a diagnosis of MS, we really increase that complexity. And so I want to talk today about this really important topic that I get to talk to my patients about on a weekly basis. I think sometimes, when we're thinking about how do we manage and cope, we sometimes maybe fantasize about what if we could have a superpower. So I wanted to start out with an icebreaker to kick us off. So if you could have one of these superpowers, which one would you choose? And I'm going to have you all take this poll here. So your choices are be invisible whenever you want, superhuman strength, talk to animals, read minds, or be able to fly. So I'll have everyone weigh in on that, and we'll take a look at the responses here.
So far, it looks like talking to animals is, being able to fly. Talking to animals are our top two. I think I'd pick talk to animals, too.
I can see that. I would love to talk to my schnauzers. Great. All right. Well, thank you guys for weighing in on that. So I wanted to cover a little bit on what is MS. I remember when I started out learning about MS, I was really struck by how complicated it can be to discuss what goes on with MS. And I think it's always important to start with that conversation. Also as a way to think about how you might share this with other people in your life, should you choose to do so. So MS affects the central nervous system, which is comprised of our brain and spinal cord optic nerves. And so with MS, areas of that nervous system become inflamed and damage the protective covering that you can see here depicted in the picture. We're looking at a neuron, and what you can see is that this axon is covered with a protective sheath called the myelin sheath. So if you think of say I'll use a phone charger as an example, like a cord, you plug in your phone charger and then plug it into your phone. It's, has this insulated coating. To the right, you can see what can happen in MS when the myelin is affected or broken down. And the significance here is that this axon is what carries signals throughout the nervous system when we do anything, for walking, talking, whatever it is we need to do. These signals are really important for helping us do that. And so when we've compromised that insulation, then the signal can't travel as smoothly or efficiently, as quickly as it would have otherwise. So this is really kind of the biological kind of underpinning of what is going on with MS and what can lead to the symptoms that we will talk about in just a moment. So there are these different types of MS that I want to touch on. Clinically isolated syndrome, if you've heard this or been diagnosed with this, this might be what you heard about when you had the first event, the first set of symptoms. So individuals with CIS may have some other features that place them at risk for developing MS. And the reason that it's not called MS off the bat is because the clinical criteria for MS says that we need more than one event across time and space. And so that's the reason. So CIS might be that first event, and there is risk for going on to MS. It doesn't mean everyone progresses to MS, but that is what CIS is. Relapsing remitting MS is one of the most common form of MS. It's almost exclusively what we see in the pediatric population, and this is where there's an attack or a relapse that's followed by remission, where the symptoms are alleviated, and then you can have an attack or relapse again, kind of on and off going forward. And so this, again, is the most common that we see. Secondary progressive would be when you go from the relapsing remitting type and then progress, where the symptoms are kind of slow and steady in their progression, and this can be with or without those relapses. Primary progressive MS, which is about 10 to 15% of the MS population, is when you see this steady worsening of symptoms from the very beginning without the periodic relapses and remission. Just so everyone has a sense of the different types of MS, that's kind of a snapshot there. So in terms of who has MS, in the United States, nearly 1 million people over the age of 18 live with a diagnosis of MS. If you look at younger individuals below 18, about 3 to 5% are diagnosed before the age of 18 years old. MS does affect women more than men, 2 to 3 times more, and this gender difference has been increasing over the past several years, or decades, I should say. Interestingly, for individuals before puberty, we can see more of a 1-to-1 ratio to boys to girls, sometimes boys even outnumbering girls. So that's an interesting thing to know about MS in young individuals. Also, interestingly, there are more cases of MS in the northern states than in the southern states. And there are different thoughts about why that is the case. So we always say with MS, because it does affect the central nervous system, our brain, spinal cord, optic nerve, we can get virtually any neurologic symptom. So you can see this very long list of symptoms, from bladder bowel dysfunction to vision changes, cognitive changes, fatigue, sleep issues, weakness. There are lots of things here on this list. And the symptoms can present different, of course, across the relapses. So, and a person could experience one or more of the symptoms here that are listed. We know that symptoms of MS can impact how a person feels physically and emotionally. And one thing we focus on a lot in our clinic is really what we call quality of life. How does a condition like MS show up in your daily life and impact you? And we actually use that information to drive our recommendations for helping individuals with MS. So I think it's really important to note that your healthcare team and family care partners want to think about how they can best support you when it comes to the specific challenges that you face. And I think it's also really important to mention MS can impact one individual in very different ways. So we don't feel that people have, if you have MS, it's not the same experience as someone else that has MS. So it's important to note the unique experience that people may have with MS. So we wanted to kind of bring all of this to life with a vignette here. So we'll call this person Jen Smith, who's a sophomore in high school, very social, really loves hanging out with friends. Here's a photo. This is a selfie. This is prior to the pandemic. But now going to school remotely has been really difficult. And also on top of it, she was recently diagnosed with MS. So Jen would really like to kind of lean on her friends, but doesn't know how to explain her diagnosis, or importantly, whether she should or not. That is a very personal decision that each person has to make, how much they choose to share with others. So she's feeling lots of different emotions lately, including frustration, sadness, confusion, and isn't sure if what she's experiencing is normal. I would also wonder if this was Jen who came to my clinic. I would want to talk to her also about if she's feeling isolated, even outside of the pandemic, where we've had to move away from our friends and kind of keep that social distancing. When you're a young person or a person with MS, it can feel isolating if you don't know anyone else who has MS, or even if you do, maybe their experience is different. So I would wonder also about feelings of isolation and would want to have that conversation with Jen. So we want to keep Jen in mind as we move through some of our other areas here, specifically identifying common emotions. So I want to talk a little bit about emotional health in the context of MS. So, we could think about Jen, who's feeling frustrated, sad, confused. You see some other emotions listed here, including anger, stress, anxiety. These are all common reactions and emotions after a new diagnosis of MS. And as a neuropsychologist working with individuals who've maybe just received this diagnosis or have lived with it for many years, I think about emotional health coming from a few different perspectives. One is certainly that reaction to the diagnosis and how they're coping over time with that. And another thing is about how MS can actually impact a person biologically, which then can lead to emotional symptoms, which I want to talk about a little bit more on the next slide. I think it's also really critical to identify and acknowledge emotional health of those around a person with MS. So we know that when someone has a medical condition like MS, it can impact the whole family and those care partners, the loved ones. So we want to also acknowledge those reactions that may be occurring in the people around the individual with the diagnosis. Also, grief is a common reaction that I really want to emphasize here. I think what happens very commonly are our patients and even their families, their parents, the people around them, start to grieve in terms of thinking about what their goals were, kind of what they imagined their life to be before they got this diagnosis. And in our clinic, I know Katherine and I and our other providers talk a lot about this with our patients. In the very beginning, the diagnosis is front and center. It's really all we can think about. And that is very natural because this is new information. This is a very big deal. What we hope for our patients over time is that MS does not, stay front and center. It is not the centerpiece of life. We want for our patients to think about the goals they had before a diagnosis of MS and to think about how they can live their fullest life while still managing MS, taking it seriously, seeing their doctor, staying on their medications and so forth, but really challenging themselves to move forward with the goals that they had before. Certainly, there may need to be some modifications. We want to be, reasonable and realistic, but not always the case that goals have to change entirely. So I want to really emphasize that piece as we discuss with our patients in clinic. So the goal is that we create strategies and treatments to help with the coping aspect of MS. So a little bit more, kind of diving a little bit deeper into recognizing depression, anxiety, stress, some of the things we've identified before, and understanding that, again, MS, the biology of MS can directly relate to symptoms of, say, depression. And that is a really important one that I want to mention some of the symptoms associated with depression. So feeling sad most days, maybe weight loss or weight gain, trouble sleeping or sleeping too much, loss of energy, fatigue, feelings of hopelessness, and even thoughts of death or suicide, which are really serious to identify and to reach out for help. And I'm going to talk a little bit about those resources and kind of what to do if any of the things I'm talking about today describe you or a loved one who is dealing with these symptoms. Anxiety is a big one that we talk a lot about in our clinic, and I think it relates very much to the reaction of managing a chronic condition across a lifetime, and also just that MS is very unpredictable, as people on this webinar I'm sure appreciate. And so just being prepared, thinking ahead, how am I going to manage all of these things? So anxiety and then stress, which often goes hand in hand. We really need for our patients to develop coping strategies to manage these things, because we know stress can play an important role in our wellness overall. And when we can manage our stress better, we can see positive health outcomes from that. So wanted to acknowledge all of these things, but to really emphasize the point that all of the things we're talking about are treatable. So I'm kind of presenting a lot of the complex challenges that are associated with MS in terms of emotional functioning. But we talk a whole lot about this in our clinic, is that there are treatments, there are research-based treatments that we know work to help individuals who are facing these symptoms. So I wanted to take a moment. I've provided you with a lot of information, and I want you to think about how you have felt when you or your loved one learned they had MS. So what were some emotions specifically that you felt? And I'm just going to give you a moment to pause and reflect, to think about if any of the things I talked about really resonated with you, or if there was something I didn't mention at all that maybe was an emotion that you felt. So take a moment to let you think about that. Feel free to jot these things down. I think writing these can be really, really useful, and I'll talk about why that is in a moment. Okay, now that you have maybe identified some emotions that you felt, and I think there's a lot of value in naming those, putting words around that, a narrative around that, and considering discussing that with your providers, which we'll touch on a little bit later. But now that you kind of have these in mind for your specific experience, I want us to think about the emotional roller coaster, if any of you have ever experienced this. So, maybe at the beginning, so looking at this lower left arrow, you're maybe feeling some confidence after a doctor's visit. Maybe you've talked about your diagnosis, some treatments, you've got this game plan and you're feeling good about it. As you come up this big hill here, you're feeling like, you know what, I've got this, I've got a plan, it's going to be okay, and we've got a lot of support in place. But then just like we all have, there can be a bad day, right, or a setback, or maybe an experience we have with another person, something that sets us back or makes us feel out of control. Maybe we're starting to worry about the future. There could be all kinds of things that could lead to that. But then, maybe you seek support, you talk to a friend, talk to a loved one, and you're starting to feel better again. And so all of these feelings are normal. The purpose of this slide is to just acknowledge that there are ups and downs, and sometimes these ups and downs are more pronounced than other times. And I really always encourage my patients to give themselves room for that and patience with that, and not judge themselves for that, right? That they want to give themselves the time and space to say, okay, I'm having this moment, and think about how they can get through that moment with the coping strategies that we'll be talking about today, in order to get to the next thing that they need to do. So wanting to normalize this experience, but I also want to hear from the audience. Have you ever felt like you were riding an emotional roller coaster? So yes, all of the time. Nope, that's not me. I've never experienced this. Yes, but only some of the time. Or, I'm really not sure. I want to give people a chance to weigh in on these questions, or this poll here.
A lot of folks are feeling like, yes, a lot of the time, and then sometimes. Mm-hmm. And some people aren't sure, but it looks like for most folks, they're feeling like a roller coaster a lot of the time.
Yes. And just like we said on the last slide, that, is considered to be the norm in the context that we're discussing. But one thing that is our goal, and I know Katherine and I talk to our patients about, is how can we know there's going to be ups and downs, that this is life, part of being human, right? Part of managing a chronic medical condition, or helping someone that we love manage a chronic medical condition. But we want to see if we can always promote that positive coping, find the things that build us up. That's going to be different for everyone. Some people may think that spending time with animals is a wonderful thing. Well, if you're afraid of animals, that doesn't work for you, right? Some people really like yoga. Some people can't stand the thought of doing yoga. So it's always very tailored to the person, and it's about becoming curious about yourself to determine what works best for you. So let me kind of wrap up here. I'll soon be handing it off to my colleague, Katherine. I do want to say that, if you're experiencing the things that we've been talking about today, and really anything else associated with MS, speaking to your doctor and your medical team can really help. Even if there's not a psychologist, a neuropsychologist, a social worker on that team, medical providers are a great starting point to help direct you to those folks that are in your community closer to home. And so questions I really encourage everyone to write down questions. The exercise we just did about the emotions you're feeling, writing those things down as well. We have a list of kind of these sample questions that might get you started, and bring those to your next appointment, or send those through if you have a portal like MyChart or those things. So what if I'm experiencing difficult emotions? Do I need to make changes with exercise and diet, right? So there's a lot of different things here, including what can you tell me about medications? And this could be medications to treat the emotional symptoms specifically. And so don't hesitate to ask those questions. It doesn't mean you have to go on a medication, but you can educate yourself so that you can make that informed decision and know what tools are out there for you. On this last slide here, let's do this first. Who can you lean on when MS is challenging you? So the list we have here, your doctor, your friends, support groups, family, or all of the above. So I want you to think about who you can lean on here before I provide you with some additional resources.
Friends, support groups, family, and all of the above. Hopefully, I hope all of the above. Yeah.
Yes, that's great. And I think sometimes just stopping to think about, all those people that are in your life that can provide that support is really important to do, to have taken inventory. And then finally, and feel free to take a screenshot or, take a picture of this slide. These are some additional resources, and really want to highlight, because we've talked today about a whole range of emotional symptoms that could be affecting you. And part of, what we strive to do as clinicians is figure out what is reaching a clinical level, meaning what is kind of interfering with life. And we did talk about suicidality, thoughts of death and dying. There is a National Suicide Prevention Lifeline that we strongly recommend as one place to go for support, but certainly talking to your close family members, friends, care partners, as well as your doctor. But I wanted to share all of these with you before we continue this conversation with my friend and colleague I've worked with for many years at Children's, Katherine Treadaway Chapman will take it away. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Harder, and thank you to everybody, to the MSAA, and for having me here today. So I'm going to be talking about accepting the diagnosis as a family unit and the importance of open communication, which we all know is very key for all relationships. In accepting the diagnosis, I think it's important for people to just recognize that every family is unique. They're all going to have different challenges. And just like Dr. Harder was saying, there's going to be all kinds of emotions that come up for everybody. And each person needs their own space to process, what's going on, either a new diagnosis or maybe change in function. And just each person find their own peace with MS. It's going to be different for everybody. So just knowing that we're all unique individuals and families. So you could talk to your medical team and your community to find out what are the resources to help me with this. So I think it's important to know family members react and adapt in their own ways and in their own time. So I would say just lay down any expectations of how you think you or others should feel or think, because all feelings are okay, all thoughts are okay, but you want to get help and resources to help manage those if they are difficult feelings and thoughts. And definitely talk to your medical team. Like Dr. Harder was saying, you can reach out to your doctor and hopefully they may know some, or at least direct you to either their nurse or social worker and steer you to those resources in your community, but also nationally, like through the MSAA. In a lot of states, you can call star 211 and find out what's available in your area. I don't know if you know about that, but that's just a great resource. Just call them and say, what's out there for people with MS? And they should be able to link you up to that, or vocational rehab services, help with insurance and financial help and things like that. And when you know more, you feel more in control of your situation, and just helps empower you to manage things. And just like Dr. Hart was saying, write down your questions before you go to the doctor so you can get those answered. And same for care partners. Whoops, I think I went too fast. The same for care partners. Please write down your questions too. And I want all care partners, our family members, everybody, to recognize and acknowledge your own feelings and monitor them. And to the best of everyone's ability, person with MS and the family, please try to retain outside activities the best you can, recreational, fun things. I think that's kind of the first to go. But once, things are settled a little bit, you please take those things back up again. And there's tons of information on the MSAA site. And again, talking to the medical team and encouraging your family and loved ones to come with you so they can ask their own questions too, and asking your physician, where can I find accurate information? Because certainly we know there is an overwhelming amount of information at our fingertips. So asking them about that. So I want everybody to just take a minute and pause and reflect and think about who is on your team. And like Dr. Harder mentioned, jot them down. Think about who you feel really connected to, who sees you, hears you, you can go to with no judgment, and that you get strength from their relationship. And think about, as far as building your team, think about these three spheres, like having a very close connection to a spouse or parent, close friend or family member, and then also having a wider circle of friends and family. And then the third sphere of having some collective group that you're part of. And that could be a sports team. It could be a support group. It could be a book club, just anything that is of interest to you, of something that you enjoy. And so here's a diagram with just lots of examples of who could be on your team. And certainly, us as the medical team, we really want to be part of your team. And of course, your physician. And just try to identify who you can turn to for support. Because we can manage as a team. In your family, that could be your siblings. And building this network of friends and family is going to really help you cope. So if you can have open discussions with your family members and friends when you're ready, that can really help them understand MS and your feelings. And let them know, I'm still the same person that I was before this diagnosis. And share that you are going to have good days and bad days, and that you welcome their support through this process. Oh, okay. So open communication, like I said, this is just so key for all relationships, because lack of communication can really have a detrimental effect on any relationship. If we don't communicate our feelings and needs, it's really difficult to develop that strong relationship with somebody else. And a very common thinking trap that people fall into is thinking that other people can read our minds or that we can read their minds. So it was funny that was part of the list of superpowers, because we cannot do that, but sometimes we think we can. So, when you are wanting to communicate your feelings, try using I statements when you want to communicate how you feel, because that helps you just say what you're feeling, and it's just a method of saying precisely how you feel, and in contrast to using you statements, which can make people feel a little defensive if you're saying, you're so selfish, or you don't get it, or you're, don't understand. Well, try using I statements, because these are non-judgmental, because you're just saying, this is how I feel. So, hey, I've had a really hard day, I have a bad headache, and then make a request. I would really like it if we could talk a little, and then help me clean up dinner. And when you are trying to have these serious conversations, please give each other your full attention. Get rid of the screens. Don't interrupt each other. And agree that you're going to take a time out if it is something that's getting kind of heated, and reconvene, at a different time. And so taking care of yourself, just so important. And I love this little diagram. So it's talking John is saying, Mom, I appreciate you for helping me out, and but I really want you to take some time for you. And so Mom's saying, yeah, I think I'll reach out to Debbie. And she does. And then Debbie's like, yes, I'd love to go get coffee with you. Let me know how, can I help out with his appointment? So this is something I suggest to people is make a list of things that people could do for you and your family, and let them pick something off that list. Because lots of people want to do something to help, but they just really don't know what to do. So they just kind of say, well, let me know if you need help. If you can make a list, and that gives them the option to choose something that they can or can't do. But just be careful. Don't make excuses for other people without giving them the benefit of making their own choices of what they can do. Because, again, most people really want to help. So we're going to talk about goals and self-care. One of my favorites, I love giving a self-care worksheet to people that I'm seeing, especially when I first start seeing them, to just really think about what are the feelings that I would be feeling if I had, everything I wanted, and then thinking about what things that you could do to promote those feelings. Is that exercise? Is it, eating well? Is it having alone time? Just puttering around time, finding nature, listening to music, all those things. And you could also write out, your goals. Start with small goals so you don't overwhelm yourself with too many goals, and revisit it, and see what where you are with it, and, take notes on it. And so I think we're going to take a polling question, which is, the polling question is, I can't do anything for a loved one or a care partner with a mental health problem. That's true, false, or not sure.
False. Unanimous. A unanimous false.
Unanimous false. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, yes, because friends and loved ones, they can make such a big difference. And so little of people who actually have mental health problems get the treatment they need. And it is treatable. So, that just breaks my heart when I think about that there are people that could be getting help that aren't. And as a friend or family member, you can be an important influence to help that person get the services they need. So I heard this acronym, I think it was from a movie I watched, but use the acronym ASK, care, and engage. So ACE, just ask directly, what are you feeling? Are you having any thoughts about hurting yourself? And then care about them, respect them, be non-judgmental, and then engage, help them access some mental health services that they can use. And then this is somewhat of a repeat, our next slide, just again, recognizing depression and anxiety and when we're under stress, and something, just to keep mindful of, that sometimes depression can look more like irritability. Somebody's really irritable and on edge. But again, they're all treatable. We can learn stress management techniques. There's just so many things to do to make you feel better. But the first, challenge or thing that has to happen is self-awareness. So that's really the first step, is just becoming aware of your thoughts and feelings. You can't change anything you're not aware of. So noticing what might be causing anxiety or stress can help you manage. And there is going to be times where, some of the MS symptoms and stress can be so similar, or they can be similar with depression too, like sleep issues and fatigue. So just trying to parse those out, and keeping a journal could be something that could be really helpful. But again, try to avoid your stressors, plan ahead, be really flexible. All of those things can help. And so journaling. So I love this. This can help you reflect. It is such a powerful habit to take on. There are so many benefits to journaling. It helps your creativity. It helps get clarity on things, helps you make decisions. Okay, I need to move my slide over, sorry. And clears emotions. It improves self-trust. Listening to yourself, reveals patterns that might be healthy or unhealthy, and give you new perspective. So like in this slide, this person's commented that she didn't realize how stressed out she was, and following her diagnosis, until she started keeping a journal. So it was helping her figure out how she was feeling or what she was thinking, and helped her to reflect, and again, see those patterns. So again, power of journaling. It can be such a powerful habit. Here's some prompts that you could use. What energizes you, what's working and why, or not working, or what is working. What are the things that are causing me stress? What are things I'm grateful for? We're happier when we practice gratitude. And you can also use it to help you process your feelings so that you can release them. So even if you want to write, I am mad because, or I am sad because, or even just write on a piece of paper and rip it up after you write it, just to help release the energy around that. So this is a big one. Can't pour from an empty cup. And I think if there are any people pleasers out there, they can definitely relate to this. Just, you want to help people, so you are saying yes to everything. Well, please try to protect yourself and think about the things that you really want to do or not. So a good boundary you can set is, if someone asks you to do something, you say, okay, well, give me time to think about it, at least 24 hours, so that you can say, okay, is this something I really want to do or not? So you make the decision and give yourself permission to say no. And you might need to start with little small goal, changes, not, a big thing, but start with setting small little boundaries with people. And I love this analogy about thinking that you are driving the Red Cross truck, delivering food and water out to hurricane victims. But if you're in such a hurry to get to every single person that you don't stop once in a while to refuel the truck, well, eventually you're going to be stalled out on the side of the road and helping no one. So think of the time that you put into exercise, relaxing, sleep, eating healthy. Those are your fuel stops. You have to have them. And practice self-compassion. I absolutely love this, and treating yourself very kindly and gently. And you can go to selfcompassion.org to get exercises to help build self-compassion. If you don't, you can take a quiz to see how self-compassionate you are. And then there's several guided meditations on there also to help you build self-compassion. And think about, like, how would you don't talk to yourself like you, talk to yourself like you would a good friend. So recognize when you're doing that, because you want to be kind and gentle with yourself and not say things to yourself you would never say to a good friend. Again, taking care of yourself by saying no. There's nothing wrong with this, and this gives you some examples just of how to say no. Sounds fun, but I can't do that now. And I have other things going on. Sorry. No, you don't have to say sorry. You just tell them, just a very simple statement. No, I can't. Hope y'all have a great time. And then activities. Oh, please keep up with your activities that you love, whether is yoga or not. Spending time with animals. Spending time talking to friends on your phone with Zoom, doing puzzles, getting out in nature, dancing, walking, anything that supports your self-care. You got to just kind of figure out what are the things that are going to help me feel the feelings I want to feel. And then if you are really struggling with depression or anxiety, or even if you're just starting and you just kind of want guidance, there's so many benefits to counseling. Counselors and therapists, they can help you reduce stress, they help you work through problems, learn new behaviors, improve coping skills. It's someone safe and objective to talk to, and there's so many different people out there that can help with emotional health. There's licensed clinical social workers. There are licensed professional counselors, psychologists. I mean, there's so much out there, and you want to find the right therapist for you. So if you can, do a small call with them. A lot of therapists will do a short call with you, so you can kind of feel it out and feel if it's a good fit. See if they have any. See if they have any experience with working with people with MS. Ask them if they're going to cover are they covered under your insurance? Are they in network? Do you work with the family members too? And, and then a really important one is, do you offer teletherapy? Because a lot of us, are not able to, that we don't want to be exposed with the pandemic. So, that would be something to consider as well. So finding a therapist, you can go on Psychology Today and put in your zip code and read about different therapists that take your insurance and see if they do have any experience. You can read a whole blurb about them and their approach to therapy. Ask your doctor for a referral. They may know someone who works with a lot of the people in their clinic. Ask your friends or family members or support group. And then, of course, you can check with your insurance. And you could also check your company benefits, because you may have an employee assistance program. That's a great place to start, because that is generally free. And then local resources like schools and universities, they often have sliding scale therapy available. Like at UT Southwestern, we have something called the Family Study Center that we send lots of people to. And I think that might have been my slide. Here's, again, additional resources, the MSAA. Please, again, ask, care, engage, with each other. There's just some great resources there. Now I think I'm handing it back over to Alexis so we can do some questions.
Oh, thank you so much, Katherine. That was fantastic. And thank you, Dr. Harder, as well. We do have a couple of questions that have just come through. Just to get started, let's start with Dr. Harder. I have one for you, if that's okay. Let's see. We've had a couple of questions about the MS diagnosis across generations, and that comes up quite frequently. So the first part of this question is, what are the signs of pediatric MS, and is it higher risk with a first-degree relative who also is living with MS?
Those are great questions. I do want to say I am not a medical doctor, so I like to put that out there right away, and I will always defer to my medical colleagues when it comes to questions about the medical things, but I have learned a lot in the time that I've been working in our clinic alongside our neurologists, and I can make a few comments about that. So symptoms of pediatric MS, and it's actually very interesting. Some of our patients who were diagnosed in adulthood will look back in time when they were younger, when they were, under 18, and think about experiences they had medically and wonder if that was the actual onset of their condition. So, it's possible that pediatric MS is underdiagnosed. I'm not entirely sure about that, but just like the list of symptoms that you all saw when it comes to MS, vision changes, changes in cognition, and those you can see that same list you can see in our kids. So that I feel like that list applies. There may be some symptoms that are more common in pediatrics than adults. I would defer to a neurologist to tell us a little bit more about that. And then my understanding about heritability of MS across families is that there is a slight increased risk, but it's not as significant as we see in other medical conditions. So I do believe there is a slight increase there. So
thank you so much, Dr. Harder. I really appreciate that. And I guess one more layer to that too is are there any, you think, any words or language or things to look out for that maybe individuals who might be thinking they need to see a doctor or having and wanting to be mindful of in their children as well, so that when they do go talk to their doctors, they can kind of explain things better?
And so is this relative to mood symptoms or
just
medical? I'm not sure if that's clarified.
Yeah, just their child, what are things to look out for, ways to, bring it up to their doctor? Because sometimes they can be a little nuanced and such.
Sure. Yeah, I would say, big things to look out for. Definitely changes in behavior, mood across time that are impacting daily life. So if you see a change in your child, maybe they're more withdrawn or they're more nervous about things, reluctant to engage in things they did before, like engaging with family members or friends. I know things are a little different, of course, with the pandemic, so it may be harder to pick up on that, but maybe spending more time alone. Again, just things that are different. And also one place to look for this too is around school and schoolwork. And again, we've really changed how we do school for a lot of people. So thinking about the grades, our grades going down, something that Katherine mentioned earlier, I really appreciated her raising this, is, something like depression can look really different across individuals, but it can also look different across age groups, right? So irritability is something we see a lot in kids, getting really upset quickly. It's like they go from 0 to 100. Maybe their reaction to the situation seems really disproportionate. It's like, oh, this didn't seem like as big of a deal as how they've reacted to it. So those are some of the things that I would think when you go to speak to a doctor about what's going on, being able to give a picture of what it looks like. For any of you who are my age or older, we used to call it the VCR test. We might now call it the DVD test. for the, so what could you see on a screen if you were in the room? What if you had a video of what was going on, to describe what it looks like and then how it's interfering with school or with life in some way. So those would be things that I think would be very useful in a doctor's visit.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Harder. That's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a question. Yeah, I have a question for Katherine, but Dr. Harder, you might have suggestions too. This could be for both of y'all. But so the question is, thank you for suggesting I use I statements versus you statements. I live in another city from my family, but I'm often in contact with my family for support via text. I found that I statements don't work as well via text. Do you have any recommendations for how to communicate how they're feeling via text versus in person?
Oh gosh, that is a great question. Because it is difficult to get it from a text message. So if at all possible, I would encourage, phone calls. If you can't meet face to face, or at least be up on the video so you can, really hear the tone of somebody's voice. And if it's something, serious, you probably don't want, that would be a better phone conversation at least. So I'm just trying to think. I don't know, Dr. Harder, what do you think?
Yeah,
I think it is hard to get the tone of the text sometimes.
That's right. I will confess I had not thought about this, but I really appreciate this question, and I'm sure I'm going to ponder it for a while after this session. But a couple of things. So I want to say one benefit to writing something out, especially if there's a lot of heated emotions, is that you can kind of edit and maybe walk away from it, come back, sleep on it. So sometimes written things can be very, very useful, or even if you write it for yourself to have in your notes when you go to talk to someone about a difficult topic. But then going to the question, there's a voice memo feature on a lot of text messaging devices where you can record your voice so they can hear those emotional nuances. I'm thinking, of course, there's always video, but then there's apps. I know Marco Polo is one, I think that's the name of it, where you can record these short videos to have a communication back and forth if it seems like things are not being conveyed well over just the words. But that's really just me kind of thinking about the technology available to us. I'm not sure how that would play out, and I've not tried that or talked to anyone who has, so that's my little disclaimer on that answer.
That's such
right.
That's
I'll be thinking about that question too.
Yeah.
So I do like the idea of writing something and then leaving it. Yeah, leaving it if it is something difficult. Because after you have a good night's sleep, it often seems very different next day.
Yes, that's right. That's
great. Thank you. So I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. This one I'll pose again to both of you. So we've heard a lot of great suggestions today on how to take care of yourself, but can you help us understand how to prioritize those suggestions? So get a good amount of sleep, exercise, eat well, but there's only so many hours in a day. So do you have any thoughts about what maybe is most important?
I definitely do. Well, I am happy to start.
Okay, go ahead.
So if I had to, of course, priorities will differ from person to person. That is important to note. But I feel very strongly from having my own life experience, but working with patients and families for so long, that sleep has to be at the top. It has to be close to the top, if not at the top. I feel like all bets are off on everything if you don't have some of these really basic needs. So I think of sleep, I think of nutrition, making sure that you're eating at regular intervals. Hangry is a real thing. And also hydration, some of those real basic things. So the other way to prioritize is think about what's causing the most distress to you as an individual and kind of work backward and figure out how you can specifically address that one thing. We usually do make a list of recommendations for our patients, but then we sit with them and work on the priorities, just like you're asking. And Katherine, I don't know if you have other thoughts.
I would just agree with you that sleep is definitely the foundation of our health. And, that there's just so many things, just like you're saying, just figuring out, working on journaling, self-care worksheet, writing out a script to yourself and figuring out what is most important, or what are the things that are going to help support me to feel this way, the feelings that I want to feel. But also asking yourself what stops me from caring for myself in this way. Is there some negative thought or belief that you can rewrite? Because we tend to believe what we tell ourselves. So if you are identifying something like, oh, I don't have time, well, as far as relaxing goes, then you are probably the person who needs it the most. Do something during the day to relax, even if it's 10 minutes.
Thank you so much. So I'm gonna pose one more question to you guys, and there's a few other questions in the chat as well, and I'll try to follow up and touch on those later after the program for y'all that are listening. But the last question that I'll post right now will be: I'm in my 40s and have MS. My daughter and son have been doing their schooling virtually this year due to the pandemic, and I've found that managing their schooling has taken up most all of my time, and I don't really have time to take care of myself. I used to meet with my support group once a week, but it's difficult to meet once a week, even virtually, with my kids looking over their shoulders all day and making sure that they're working on their tasks for school through Zoom. Are there any suggestions on how I can make time for myself, even in this new normal?
Well, I'm thinking again, you have to, I am giving everybody permission that's listening to this to at least give yourself 15 minutes a day to do just something that is just for you, and that's not has to do with electronics, unless it's, listening to like a guided meditation, but, that's electronic free, just sitting outside, playing with your animals, reading for fun, doing something that you're just reading for fun, move, take a walk, try to limit caffeine. I mean, there's lots of ways to support yourself. But I am, again, just telling you, if you can't make that time, you are the person who needs it the most to do that. And just, let the kids know, using your I statements, I am just so tired, and mom just needs a break for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was going to add to that a couple of thoughts. I agree with what Katherine just said, and I think part of finding success at carving out those few minutes that I have seen success with, and I have noticed, is if you keep a list of things. It's sort of this planning ahead. Keep a list of things that you would do if you had 5 minutes. If that's walk around the block, or like you said, play with the animals, or read a couple pages of a book, or lay in your bed, whatever that might be. Do a 5-minute meditation from an app. Have that little list ready to refer to, because I think sometimes that those moments sneak up on us and we don't realize a break is coming up, or sometimes we get this gift of extra time if something gets canceled, or there's just a change in the plan. So having that ready to go. And the other thing is looking at the day in advance, literally in 15-minute increments. There are calendars that are made like that to just sort of see, where can I sneak this in? So a lot of it is the planning, so you can execute that immediately when there is an open window, because sometimes a quick break is gone before you realize it was a break. So I just wanted to also mention that as a kind of practical idea.
Yeah, and one other thing, just don't strive for perfectionism either. It's never going to be perfect, but it's going to be okay. And just acknowledge yourself. You're doing the best you can. And if it's not a perfect healthy meal for the night and you're just going to get pizza, well, that's totally okay. Everybody's going to be okay.
Oh, golly, thank you so much, Dr. Harder and Katherine. That was just absolutely fantastic. And thank you so much for being here with us this afternoon and taking, a deeper dive into this conversation and answering our questions. As I mentioned before the program, I please encourage and thank everyone here who's participating for taking the time, if they could, to complete the linked program evaluation survey that we're going to share with everyone. And if you have any additional questions or would like to know more about MSAA's programs and services, please don't hesitate to reach out directly to me, Alexis Crispino, or MSAA. And as a friendly note, this afternoon's webinar will be archived to our website, and you can revisit this information and share it with friends and family or anyone in your community who you think might be interested. And we also hope you'll be able to join us again next week for part 2 of It's a Generational Thing with Dr. Harder and Dr. Katherine, where we'll touch on some other subjects. And I'd like to again thank our sponsors, Bristol Myers Squibb, Genentech, and Novartis for making the webinar possible.
That concludes today's presentation. We thank you for joining us. Please follow the link in the prompt to be redirected to the participant evaluation form.